It's okay, it takes time.
Welcome back to Strong. I'm so excited to bring another incredible guest. Today, we are zooming out to Akron, Ohio, USA, where we're going to be meeting with Tammy. Tammy's a visionary and an innovator and emerging entrepreneur. She is the founder and CEO of Working in Progress, Inc., the Youth Achievement and Development Program, the Gray Global Innovation Consulting, and Wheelhouse Innovative Network. Tammy, that is a mouthful. Welcome to Strong.
Oh my God. Thank you, Maria. I'm so excited. Thank you so much and humbled that you asked me to be on your show and to share, for us to have conversations. Looking forward to it.
I'm so excited to have this conversation. This is my third conversation in the series that I describe as Let's Talk Education, Bias, Discrimination, and how we can be helping our youth, not only in the classroom, but parents at home as well. And I think it's a very needed conversation that I know I've shied away from only because it wasn't that it was a topic I didn't see as important. It was a topic that I didn't feel qualified enough to have. But the more research I do and the more I'm seeing going on in the world right now, I realize that we don't have time to get the proper educator qualification. I think we all need to jump in and start having more of these conversations so that not only can we help the youth, but really we can feel more comfortable so that when they're speaking to us, we feel confident enough to guide them through those conversations. So I'm so excited to be in dialogue with you today.
Thank you.
I think let's begin right at the beginning. It's really important that anybody watching this understands that Tammy and I are talking about her view, her worldview, and her perspective, as I do with every guest in every episode. So nothing that we're saying today is set in stone. And I think it's about dialogue. It's about having and conversation that can carry on into your homes, into your classrooms, and into your communities. So, Tammy, let's go backwards in time to when you were a younger person. And I'd like you to take us through your worldview. What did it mean and what did it look like to be a young Tammy going through the education system in your community?
Thank you, Maria. So, yes, let's go back to, of course, elementary is where we all begin, right? At our K, just beginning into school. And so the school that I went to was predominantly, I would say predominantly European, but, some, there was Blacks, and it was actually mixed culture there. And so going into it, not knowing what that world looks like, I didn't really have a true awareness until I'm going to say about the third grade. And when they started testing us and saying, okay, some kids need the extra learning or reading, and they started separating those kids from the regular classroom, where they're giving them extra reading. And I can't remember the term, but it was, they had that teacher that was a special, I want to say special ed teacher, but she was that special teacher that helped kids. And so not thinking too much of that. And we had, a mixture of, European teachers and African American teachers. But the thing was, it was none of the information that was being shared really, or especially like history had any, our history. It was more so, very structured, very monitored curriculum that was being taught. And then I myself probably didn't see too much difference of the separation, because we had a Black principal, which was, to me, in my understanding, was a norm to having Black principals. So as a little girl, it wasn't, and then, sitting there in the classroom, to me, it didn't, I learned differently, but and you shared that, but the teachers really was like, oh, well, you'll get it, you'll understand, or maybe you just, had, a little slow on this, but it was my process and how I thought, that really didn't get the attention it needs. And so I relied on my family. I had brothers and sisters that were older. I'm the youngest of four, that helped me through the curriculum in the classroom. So as a young child, it wasn't until I got a little older and then really got into high school and saw the division of how we were being treated. And then what programs got into what schools, right? So there were certain schools that got, the additional resources. And then what schools didn't get the resources. But now the high school that I have our kids have multiple resources now. But then there wasn't a whole lot for us.
I find that really interesting. As I'm hearing you speak, I'm kind of reflecting back on my childhood and going to school. I never remember thinking that my teachers either looked like me or didn't. I don't know. I just always remember thinking, and I remember in a past conversation I had with the previous guest, I also said, I was just so focused on me being different because I don't know. I think I was just like, do I fit in? And I see that often right now with the youth, but I wonder, was it because I did look like them and the teachers treated me the same, or was it because I was so in my own sphere? And I often wonder, and this is something that I'm also wondering, does the system play on that when we're thinking about the youth? Does the system manipulate the fact that, we'll make the ones that fit in, and we'll make the ones that don't fit in, make it really obvious that they're different. And the ones that are kind of in and out, will give them subtle messages of difference. But then again, it's all based on perspective. There's no scientific evidence to what I'm saying. But in listening to what you're saying, you saw someone in a high-ranking position in your school, the principal, who looked like you. So for you, that just felt like the norm. But then what I'm also hearing you say is the way that you were being taught wasn't really aligning with your style of learning. Do you think that had something to do with learning styles and pre-timing when teachers were aware that there were different types of learning styles? Or do you think now that you look back, especially in the work that you do today, that actually that had nothing to do with your learning styles and that had everything to do with bias and discrimination?
So, well, let's talk about that, Maria. So think about when Blacks were first able to get into the school system, right? There were so many barriers that we had to overcome. One, just getting into the schools and, getting them segregated. Two, the being able to learn, there were times where we weren't able to be in a classroom. We were there, if you go to college, they weren't allowed to be in the room. They had to sit outside and listen to hear, right? So think about how they have structured the education learning, and it hasn't changed, which is, over a period of year. The youth has changed, the kids have changed, but the way they have taught and the information has not changed. They haven't adapted. So it's very hard for kids nowadays to really sit and really comprehend what they're teaching. One, good point, learning style. I'm a big fan of that. I believe that each child, we all learn differently. So sitting in that classroom, so the system has been designed that as when they do those tests, they determine whether or not a child is going to go on to college or whether they're going into the prison system. They started categorizing children. And so statistically says, okay, you rate at this space, and so you're going to be, high achiever. And then if you don't, then you're going to be low achiever, and they give you IDPs, and then they, give you, put you in these special classes, and then they start to shift. And there's also been science where, okay, the kids that really learn, they put them at the head of the class, the teacher pay them more attention. Those who don't, they lag. And so the kids that are not as, as quick of learning are putting, again, there's a system. They put them in the front, the ones who can really learn, and then they start the ones who are not there. They're in the middle, and those who really lag are in the back of the class. And so the teacher is focusing, and she's not. And if the kid can't catch up, then they think it's their problem. They having an issue, right? Little Johnny can't focus, and he's all over the place. Well, his attention, maybe, not looking at that he's not focused, but maybe he needs a little bit more time. Maybe he just thinks differently. He receives differently. Again, I'm all about understanding the theory of styles and how we receive information, because nobody receives information on the same, right? You receive your information differently. I receive mine, but and how we process it. And so during that time, even today, kids are sitting in class and I'm seeing it, whereas they are so focused on what they are told that they need to do in class, that kids do get left behind. That No Child Left Behind, we're still leaving them behind because we're not helping them.
So let's put this into context. You're talking to us through which paradigm right now, just so that we know, because listening will have people from all over the world. So No Child Left Behind, is that something that comes from where you are, or is that
Yes.
a global initiative that you're aware of?
That is, that's where, in the United States, we have the initiative of No Child Left Behind. So, and they were, putting programs in place because they saw the gap of kids not achieving, not graduating and learning. But, and it's been in place for, several years, but the gap is still is widening even more so.
Okay.
Kids are still being left.
And then also keeping up on this conversation. I mean, I'm hearing you talk, and I completely resonate with what you're saying, this concept of we all learn differently, and it's important to be aware of how we're teaching our students and even their positionality in the classroom. However, the assumption that I'm also hearing is that all students are equal. Is that what you're saying in terms of remembering our topic tonight based on bias and discrimination?
Well, when you say all children are equal, in equal learning or equal understanding, or are you saying they're all equal when they come into the classroom? So when they come in, they're sitting there, okay, so they're supposed to be, right? All treated the same, right? In learning, they get all the information the same. And so they're saying, well, it doesn't matter what color or race you are, you're all getting the same information. But it does matter when the teacher who doesn't understand the different cultures and how a person is a child sitting in class and may not have and I'm gonna try not to go all over the place, and I'm sorry, Maria, but one of the issues is sitting in class and you haven't eaten today, so you can't focus. But the teacher is not in tune to that. They just think, and so they're going on with their classroom. And so because they haven't met the need of the child emotionally, and they need to be a whole child, how can you learn, right? How can you really, really sit there and learn if in your mind you're sitting there as a child focusing on other things? Um, and I've heard students and had conversations with them that they don't think that the teachers care. So it has to go beyond the relationship of just teaching. We're social beings. They need to have social interaction with the person that's giving them the instruction to receive it. So there's so many, facets of why that's, a gap. But, if you can't connect with me, how can I learn better from you? So there's so many, issues and areas. So I hope I'm answering your question. If not, please reframe it, please.
Yeah, no, you are, but I still feel like we're skirting around the conversation. And I love that I'm noticing this, because this is what I feel happens when we're talking about bias and discrimination and racism, is that we don't call it what it is, and we kind of
Yeah.
skirt around it. And I think it's because we're all too busy trying to be polite and not really name it. But I know that it's time to name it. And
Yeah.
and when you look at the literature and the research, they're all going into the same direction of saying, in order to be advocates and allies, and in order for change to happen, it's time to stop being polite, and it's time to start calling it out. So
Yeah.
Tammy, when a teacher is standing at the front of a room and facilitating their lesson, I know as an educator myself, there are multiple things going on for that educator. One is the pressure from above saying you need to get through this curriculum. Another, depending on which country you live in the world, and the national exams or the national assessments that dominate the focus of curriculum. And three, the reality that the teacher is one person and there might be over 25 students in a room, depending on where you go. So we have to also be realistic about what's going on. But then at the same time, as a researcher and as an advocate of equity in education, I also understand that it's not good enough to use those excuses. We have to find ways around it to facilitate for our students, because at the end of the day, we're not teaching a room filled of robots. We're teaching human beings who have feelings. And I think that before they can be open to learning, they have to feel connected to the individual in the room, which, if we can keep going around what came first, the chicken or the egg, where do we do it? But we have to start somewhere. So Tammy, do you believe in the work that you do, in the research that you've done, in the experience that you've seen, that this is easier, or is it the same challenges, whether the child is a child of color or if the child is not?
I think it's still a challenge. It really is. It's still a challenge, especially for those of color in the education system. And yes, we need to call it out. Why be afraid of? Because if you don't confront it, it's going to be there still years and years afterwards. And if you want to be good educators, don't be afraid of it, because you're setting the example for those in your classroom to learn how to have a voice, to represent themselves. They have a voice. So I tried to have I worked in one of the schools, and the teacher was European, and she needed help. Her whole classroom was predominantly African American. And so she and I had this conversation, and she admitted, I just don't have the skills or the understanding to reach these kids. So, and I explained to her, why in our culture, she kind of get it, but then the teachers need to be educated on the different cultures that are in there, different types of kids that are in their classroom. Why be afraid of that? You know, because when you become a teacher, you're not going to go in and sit down and have a perfect classroom.
Yeah.
You have to be able to share and say and confront those things that, whether they have, you know, Blacks or Asians or, you know, we here in Akron, Maria, we have a lot of refugees that come in, right? I mean, we have a place that's called International Institute. We have a lot of refugees. So they have to have those conversations of how to teach and not be afraid of that. You have to come to a point that it is, and it's going to be in your face. We've been fighting this for years. And so for me, when I talk to my students, and whether they're Black or white, I talk to them about it and to get their opinion. How do they feel about it? You know, how do you feel? What is it? What are you lacking in the school system? You know, well, she doesn't, you know, she focuses more on these type of kids than us. And when she speaks in these terms and the dialect we don't understand. Well, what's wrong with actually, you know, sitting down, having a conversation with the students and saying, okay, how can I best help you? Regardless, you know, like you said, your teacher, you're focused on what you're supposed to be doing. You got to do these tests, you got to do, but if you can just take just maybe a hour out of the class, or I won't say an hour, but maybe 15 minutes each day to discuss it, they will start to feel that you care. That can break a barrier. If you just show me a racial barrier that you actually care. That's part of the conversation. First, let's just have a genuine, you know, empathy of where I'm at and how I feel. How about let's just acknowledge that?
I love that. I love that. So without taking accountability and ownership off of the educator, I want to point a finger at the school leader. And I know that in order for that to happen, it has to be a whole school approach. And also, if we look at the literature, you know, the same comes out. We have to have a school leader who's not going to marginalize the requirements for looking at, you know, invisible issues like mental health issues that are rampant across the school, not only with our students, but also with our adults, our educators, our parents. But in order for a teacher to feel that they can have these conversations, because we have to be honest, Tammy, when you're sitting at the front of the room, you have to be really careful about what you say because it might be misinterpreted. And the last thing you want is an angry parent coming back at you. Mm-hmm. And then a leader of your school saying, we're not allowed to talk about these topics. Why are you even having this conversation? So I think we need to point the finger at a school leader who will not marginalize it, but make it a priority in their school, that teachers are trained, diversity training is a requirement. And it shouldn't be something that we do once in our career. I think it should be something that is renewed and really is specific to the needs of our schools and the needs of our students. Like you said, certain areas have different pockets of different types of diversity. Mm-hmm. I also believe that parents should be involved in collaborating with the school to help to educate. I mean, let's be honest. If we look at the diversity right now, for example, in the institution where I'm currently working, we have over 65 nationalities. For one individual, one teacher to be proficiently, you know, on top of 65 nationalities, that's like a full-time job on its own, correct? But then in her classroom or in his classroom, there might only be 5 nationalities. So we need to be collaborating. It really can't just be that we do one course and that's it. So Tammy, let's go back into your experiences. What are some of the top tips that you can offer parents with children who may be coming home saying, the teacher, doesn't get me. I don't fit in. Everybody looks at me like I'm different and I feel different. Maybe that's true, maybe that isn't. But how can a parent support their child so that they don't go through their educational career feeling like a minority, and actually can educate their teacher in the process of being educated by their teacher?
So one of the ways I think parents can do that is, so learning is not just in the education institution, right? Learning is also comes from the family. So, it's that nature versus nurture, where you get your, information. So it really, the family can really help with the child by also reinforcing their culture within their home, having those conversations, showing them, reading, bringing materials and, watching, education shows on who they are, helping them to understand that they are, they may feel that they're different, and it's only difference in, in how, the color of your skin, but your process, your mind, your learning, in how you learn may be also different, but you are a whole person, and help them understand there's nothing wrong with you. And I hate when people think, oh, there's something wrong. No, there isn't. You're just a different individual, and it's okay to be that way. So the parent has to work with yes, they have to work with the schools. And we tried that. We tried to get our parents to work, to come to PTAs and come to talk to teachers, and there's such a big disconnect. So if you have to get that learning in home, and the parent, it has to be a whole collective, right, of parents talking to their kids, also teaching, also training, and then they bring that, and also reinforcing confidence in their children. Because you think about it, they first get their interaction and learning from the parent anyway, before they go to the institution. So you got to have that foundation and build it there. Then when they go into the institutions, they're confident. But they also have to be a collaboration with other resources with the school. Like what I do is I teach those things. And so being a partner in this is a resource with a parent. I work with the parent to help them and help their children. So it has to be a true village of working together, and we have to be open. You can't be closed-minded and say, and not give the child and say, well, I don't have time. We have to make time, Maria. Like you said, the time is now. We have to make time. We have a window of opportunity to make this shift, to go from what is traditional to non-traditional, because we have non-traditional kids. So for a parent, seek resources, have a conversation, be upfront, be, the child will be able to receive it. Be honest and hear and listen to the child. Then take that concerns to the teacher, but also go to your PTAs. I don't know if you guys have PTAs over there. This is our parent teacher association, but also go to the meetings. So they have leadership meetings. Go to those meetings and have conversation. We just had a conversation about the DEI and wanting to put that in the schools, and that, and parents came out in droves about that, right? Because they wanted to be, inclusive of talking about other cultures. And then there were those who didn't want it in the school. Where you're talking about history, or we're asking is add other history so kids can be well-rounded, but they didn't want it. So if you can't get it in school, your parents, your first foundation is your home. Education institution is just your supplement to help you, learn and grow and become additional, be a better person.
I agree, but I also I'm wearing the hat of a parent right now who
Yes.
may not have had the access to education and gain the knowledge that you and I have been privileged enough to gain based on consequences of life. And I also am very conscious of how intimidating an educator can be without even realizing that they are. So for a parent that feels marginalized and a parent that feels not smart enough or just doesn't feel as confident, it must be really challenging for them to step forward and say, hey, wait a minute, what if we could do this slightly different, because my child is a part of our system and my child is not an individual isolated case. If my child is feeling this, other children might as well. And again, I recognize that the awarenesses that we're talking about are not based on waking up one day. They're based on the privilege we had to the access of education, which is why we need to be focusing on how we're educating young people, because for change to happen, we have to be able to empower our parents as well. So, Tammy, let's walk through your eyes again. I think it's really important as professionals that we don't just preach, that we actually use our own life experiences to teach what we've learned today, because we are a consequence of our life experiences, aren't we?
Oh my
Everything
God,
we
yes.
do
Yes.
is based on what we've learned.
Yeah. So, for me, Maria, there was a time in my life that, like you, I just didn't feel like I did probably pretty much and got to high school. And I was really wondering, where do I fit in? And it wasn't until I reached out, or maybe she reached out to me. It was a teacher that I was able to have a conversation with. And I felt comfortable to talk. But, getting back to, and my mom was a working mom. She worked 2 or 3 jobs. And so she, wasn't always there and being able to have those conversations. And she probably did feel, inadequate talking to teachers. But she was able to have the one lady that reached out to me was able to speak to me and then be able to have that conversation with my mom and made her feel that there was resources for me, and having that conversation and was open to that. But again, you're right, there's some parents that are not as educated or in tune to that, and they fear. It's a sense of fear, right, of what they don't know. And so I think one of the things as a community, um, reaching out to the parents and just opening up and saying, hey, we're having something for you and the kids, and then give them a setting where they can feel comfortable to talk. So one of the things I did was I had a all boys conference. And so even though it's all boys, I provided resources and conversation for the parents that brought their kids. And it was a safe space where they weren't so they didn't feel intimidated, and they were able to talk about and unload about what their frustrations are. And we come to find that their frustrations is, of course, job, work, resources, raising kids, and not being able to help their child in their homework. That's another frustration, right? And so providing those resources outside of the school and helping them connect to those gave them the power and the feeling that they could be more in their child's life and help their child. So it doesn't come always from just the institution. we as a community, and I don't know how much, the resources you guys have, but we have to reach out to them, put them in a setting and make it, conducive for them, and they will be able to open up and talk and help them that way. Then they can work with their child. Then they can feel confident. They just need that one word, that one person that can help them.
That's amazing. I agree. It really always comes back to the memory of that one person that made a young person feel seen, heard, connected. So, and I think this is a wake up to every educator watching this right now, that, we shouldn't be waiting for our leaders to do it. We can be that one person. And most often a young person looks to their classroom teacher or subject teacher as that one person. It rarely is the principal. It usually is my teacher. So Tammy, there's so much I want to ask you, but I'm really, really conscious of our time.
But I do want to say, Maria, and I don't cut you. So one of the things we really have to understand is that having that conversation with a child, he will also tell you. So that's the reason I started the program, Working in Progress, because I saw a need in my community. I lived it. I saw it. And so I made the conscious decision that I'm going to go. I'm going to do it. I'm going to have the conversations because they're going to look at me and see me and they're going to trust me. But we have to do that.
So when you decided to do it, how did you have the confidence that you could succeed at it?
Well, actually, I just was following, my faith. I believe that God just told this is what he wanted me to do. And as a young Black child growing up in the schools, I was just saying, if I could just get one, I start with one child. And then if I can get another one, and I change and affect their life, I did what I was supposed to do. So you just start growing each one, reach one. And so success, success is that I made a difference in a child's life. I, gave them information that they didn't have, because remember, they don't know what they don't know. And that's the same with the parent. That was my success. And it wasn't until a young boy emailed me and said he came to the conference at the age of 10, and I think he was 16, and he said that it changed his life. He said it, not his parent. He said it because he was going down the wrong path. So, we got to talk to our kids. We got to, hear and listen to them, because a lot of times the leaders don't do that.
Do you believe that a child in a classroom, for example, and I'm only asking this because this is what our topic is about. So would a child of color look at a teacher who they would define as white, like perhaps me? Would they look to me and say, I can take on board what this teacher is saying? Or will it be dismissed because of the color of my skin?
Well, I don't think per se they're going to first do that. Because I didn't do that and say, I'm not going to receive her as, because she's he or she is of a different color, a different race. I want to try to really understand. But if I notice something or the preferential, then I, say, oh, well, I can see the lines where they're being drawn. Think about it. Kids are very perceptive. So I don't think they're going to look at the teacher and say, oh, because they're white. They would like to, but think about it where we are now, Maria. Years ago, that wasn't, it's more prevalent now, understand it, because all the media has brought it. And so our awareness, we're woke. And so now they want to have that. And it's being talked about more so in the forefront. But coming in on a young age, they're not really thinking about that.
So I want to pick up on what you just mentioned, because I think right now you're right. Social media, what's been happening in the last few years with cases around the world that are now grabbing, they're not letting people think about it. They're just making people acknowledge this has to be done. I don't think that we woke because of these situations. I think young people, especially young people of color, they've always been experiencing this. The only thing is now they feel empowered to voice it and to be heard voicing it. And I think that social media has allowed them to do that. It's given them a platform, because we're not only
Yes.
speaking to people in our small community anymore, we're now we're speaking on a global scale, and there's young people all over the world. And even if we take color and discrimination out, if we just look at what was been happening with Greta Thunberg, for example, the teenager who really had a voice when it came to environmental issues and conditions. I mean, she even got the attention of the Prime Minister of the United States of America, and he reacted to her. So it's amazing what social media can do. And now here we are in a position where young people are saying, hey, we've always been feeling this way. Now we want you to know that these subtle assumptions being made about who we are because of the color of our skin, we have to really look differently. And it's not just about, being a person of color and being a white person, because it's not that simplistic. There's so many layers to this, from, our ethnicity, our nationality, our citizenship, who we are, how we define ourselves, how in an interview on YouTube, I came across an interview with the founders of Black Lives Matter, and they talked about the spectrum of color from white to black. And it really is about how close you are to one end and the other. So it's not simplistic. So my question for you now, right before we bring this conversation to a close, is, yes, we're woke. Yes, the world is paying attention. I do feel that COVID is getting more attention, and the world seems to not be able to look at more than one issue at the same time. It seems to need to focus on one issue more than the other. And I feel like this conversation that started to get the global audience's attention is now suddenly going into the background. And it only seems to come to the forefront when somebody's life was lost. And unfortunately, it becomes the individual as opposed to the larger issue, doesn't it? How do we keep it alive? How do we keep this conversation alive? How do we ensure that it doesn't become about one student in a classroom? How do we ensure that educators don't look to their classrooms and say, well, no one's complained about me, I must be doing it right? How do we teach young people reflexivity when teachers are not all learning the skill of reflexivity? What are your top tips?
I think what you're doing now is really part of it. Bring awareness globally. It's not just here in the United States issue. It's a global issue, and we have to work together. We have to keep it alive, because again, you're right. When what's the newest thing, going to push it to the background, right? Because it's not in their face anymore. We have to be the voice. We have to continue to speak and work together. That is the key, because our voice, conversation with the parents, with the kids, with the teachers, talking to the teachers. What do they need help with? How do they become better teachers? They're not bad teachers. They just need the information too, right? And not all pointing fingers, like you said, at them, but what are the leaders doing? Having those conversations with them continuously, not letting up, because soon as we do, they'll think it's not important. They think that it's been resolved and it's not an issue. We have to keep it alive. We have to do things like what you're doing and continue to work together and voice it and share it. Those are the things that are going to keep it going.
Conversation and accountability. Thank you so much, Tammy. I'm just so happy that we were able to carry on this conversation. I think it's probably one of the most needed conversations that both directly and indirectly affects everybody walking on the planet. And we need to do more of it. And, the more I listen to guests when we're in conversation with this, the more I realize I'm really concerned about those young people in the classroom that are watching, but don't have the confidence to speak out. And then they grow up to look back at those years and think, I wish I did, but no one gave me the platform to. I was waiting for that permission. So I think that these conversations need to happen in the classroom. It's great to have them here on YouTube. It's great to have them with amazing guests, but we need to trickle them into the classroom. So hopefully we get to do that. And that brings us to the end of another incredible conversation. Today we were speaking with Tammy, who's zoomed in from Ohio, United States of America. And we were talking about her perspective, discrimination, bias, and education, what we can be doing to empower our educators, empower our young people, and make sure that this conversation of race and discrimination continues. Because to empower the youth, we have to be able to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you all next week when we bring another incredible guest to Strong.